I am really excited to have Kyle Palmer, the principal of Lewis and Clark Elementary, on the Transformative Leadership Summit today. He has been an inspiration to me for a long time. And if you go back to the Transformative Principal podcast, you can learn a lot about the kinds of things that he's doing. But what I want to talk with him today about is how to develop teacher leaders. So we're going to take some time to get into that. He has done a lot of amazing things, and he's presented at Model Schools Conference about all those awesome things, like maker spaces and innovation and all that. Kyle, thank you so much for being a part of the Transformative Leadership Summit. I'm really excited.
I'm very excited too, Jethro. Thank you for asking, and I'm looking forward to sharing some of the things that we've done at our school that hopefully will help others learn and transform education in their school as well.
And one of the benefits of doing this type of conference is that we can really focus on things that are specific for principals, things that they can do to improve an aspect of their leadership. And one of the areas where you're really strong is empowering your teacher leaders. And I learned that last year when I met you, and you had people who were there presenting with you, and they looked like and acted like they were in control, and they knew their purpose, and it was just really cool to see that. So let's talk a little bit about some of the cool things that you've done at your school recently, and then let's talk about how you empowered teachers. So start by talking about some of the things that you're really excited about that are happening at your school right now.
We probably a lot of it started with our makerspace and what Angela Rosheim created in our library. Angela is immense talent. She's extremely passionate about education, and really she was transforming education in our school before anyone really knew what she was doing. It started with her Genius Hour instruction and getting kids to follow their passions and to learn about something that they're passionate with. That resulted in her needing supplies and materials and space. So that turned into the makerspace, which we got a big grant from our Liberty School District Foundation to get started. And then from there, it's just continued on. When I present in our presentation next week, part of how we organize our presentation is to start, small and then go all. And I think we started small with the makerspace and with what Angela was doing in the library that impacted the kids in that classroom when they were in there. And then we started to try to build the capacity of that out to all of the others in our school. And Angela was a big part of that, absolutely a big part of that. Other things that we kind of came about after that was our project Lead the Way. We were asked to be a kind of a beginning school for Project Lead the Way, or PLTW, which is a curriculum designed modules that we've implemented into the classroom to build STEM skills, science, technology, engineering, and mathematics into the classroom. Last year, two years ago, we did 2 of the engineering modules. This past year, we did computer programming and then biomedical sciences modules in our classrooms. And I think that was one of the first things that really got our teachers to see the power of what we were trying to do, and that was to create more relevance and rigor with our kids, create more of a student-centered classroom instead of a teacher-directed classroom. And even though it wasn't smooth as anything is, I look back on my 9 years as being a principal, and I describe PLTW as probably one of my biggest challenges of implementation, but also one of our biggest successes. And as skeptical as some people were when we first started, there is no way you could take PLTW away from our teachers because they're so passionate about that, what it does for our kids, the conversations and the dialogue and the learning that it has created in our classrooms has been extremely powerful. And I think that's just led to other changes in their days, and it's led to more PBL type units. It's led to personalization that we started a little bit last year. It's led some teachers to start doing some co-teaching. This past year, we created maker spaces in our hallways. We created a makerspace outside for our recess. Our teachers have been extremely dedicated and focused on how to continue pushing the envelope of innovation in our school. And that's been extremely humbling and extremely exciting. And I just love our school to death.
Yeah, that's awesome. And why are your teachers taking such an active role in it? And we all know teachers are dedicated. We all know teachers want to do things, but not in all schools do they take such an active role as they do in your school. What are some of the things that you've put in place to help them be the leaders in your school?
I've always defined leadership by how you can get others to go from point A to point B. So it's, as a leader, it's never been about me. It's never been about what the principal says or the principal does. It's very much not a top-down organization at our school. I view all of our teachers, all of our staff, custodians, paraprofessionals as equals. And actually, to prove that point, one of our paraprofessionals in our library, Lynn Haynes, is maybe the second biggest influencer in our school. Her and Angela work together, and she just has an extreme dedication and passion and humongous heart for kids. And she has done so many things at our school to positively impact our school as well. So those two are quite the dynamic duo. I think as a leader, you have to be secure. You have to be secure that others are going to do things, that others are going to get credit for things, that others, we've always tried to create a school that everyone loves and everyone wants to, be part of something bigger than themselves. And they want to come to school every day and give their all. And I think I allow a lot of autonomy. It's I'm not going to walk in and tell teachers they specifically need to do this, this, and this. There's always things we're tight on, but we're also loose on how they do that. As being a PLC, one of our beliefs has been that we never expect teachers to walk lockstep with each other in their teams. We never expect teachers to be robots in the classroom. That's the kind of the art and the science of who they are as a teacher. We have to have things that we're consistent with and that we all agree on, but we want teachers to be who they are in the classroom. And I think they feel they have a lot of autonomy, and I trust them. And I think, giving a lot of trust has gone a long way versus just, watching over every little thing that they do and micromanaging them.
Yeah. I was talking with Doug Tim as part of this leadership summit, and he talked about the tight and loose leadership, where you're tight on things and loose on different things, and how important that is for us to be successful. Can you talk a little bit about what things you're tight on and what things you're loose on with your leadership?
Sure. We're tight on, we have specific learning outcomes for each grade level and each subject. We're tight on, they're going to track those and are going to monitor the learning from their students. We're tight on that we got, defined learning outcomes, and we're loose on how they get there. We're loose on what they do as teams or what they do as teachers to use that art of who they are to get their kids to learn. We've been tied on these last couple of years on, we want more of a student-centered classroom. We want less teacher talk. We want more student talk. We want kids to fail and learn from their failures, and we want kids to innovate and try new things. We want kids to work in the makerspace. We want kids to make and create and have fun in the classroom. We want kids to be in a more comfortable, more of a different learning environment where they're more flexible, so they're move around, so they can sit where they'd like, they can collaborate with who they need to, but we're loose with how they design their classrooms, what they use, how they do their groups, how they have kids work together, we talked about we're going to be tied on the modules. You're going to do a module per quarter. We can be loose on, you fit it in when you think it's best. So how your day is. I know when we first started PLTW, every grade level did it somewhat differently. Some grade levels try to put it in 3 days, and some grade levels did it an hour every day for 2 weeks. Some grade levels, chose half days. We wanted the modules to be done and to be done effectively. And again, by giving the teachers the autonomy to do that, they put it in when they thought was best, and they took more ownership for that. So
yeah. I love those examples because they really teach you a lot about your school just in that little examples. those little examples, but how do you help teachers feel safe to do those things that they can be loose on? How do you make sure that they feel the looseness and you avoid the micromanaging that's easy for us as administrators to start feeling?
That's a really good question. I try to give feedback, through observations and through being in classrooms and being with teams and try and talk to them about what we expect. And I think just through those conversations, listening to them. I think it's really easy to tell if someone's listening to you or not listening to you. I've always taken the approach, as a former teacher, I got great advice when I was becoming a teacher to becoming a principal, that don't ever forget what it's like to be a teacher. And I've tried to remember that every single day and listen to teachers and it's easy to rebuke them and to say, well, stop making excuses. But we've tried to not do that. We've tried to listen to them. I think they feel listened to when they've got concerns about things. I very much try to protect our teachers and try to take some of their obstacles out of the way. And I'm just reiterating what we are as collaborative teams. We're tight and we're loose. These are what I expect you to do. This is what I'm going to focus on. The rest of the stuff, it's what you feel like as a team you want to do. And when teams work closely together, they get very motivated, they get very inspired, and they, when teams have autonomy and trust, they will far exceed your expectations, as opposed to just doing whatever they have to do and being done with it. Doing things because they want to, not because they have to.
Yeah. Having to deal with teachers who aren't doing the things that you're tight on, how does that impact them doing the things that you're loose on?
There's probably less trust, a lot of it though is it's kind of that peer pressure amongst teams. I think that's why it's so important to have highly collaborative teams, is that people understand they're not just responsible to the principal, they're responsible to each other. And if I'm going to share our kids and move our kids around, I'm not going to let my teacher team down. You can say what you want to about the principal and the leaders, and sometimes people get crossways, but they rarely ever get crossways with their team and with their friend and their colleague, and they don't want to let them down. And I think when we maintain that focus on what our teams need to be doing, we talk a lot about the right work of a PLC. I try to describe for them, spending time building a CFA or assessing a CFA, or talking about the student work, or talking about how you're going to commonly and consistently score a CFA, talk about RTI groups, talk about unpacking standards, talk about providing enrichment to students. That's the right work versus the fake work of talking about their social lives, or talking about a field trip, or talking about the presidential election, or whatever it may be. We try to provide feedback to teams based on how they're spending their time with that. But yeah, I mean, if teachers are tight on the right things, I'm good with what they're tight on the right things, then it's easier to give them autonomy when they're doing what you expect them to do.
Yeah. So you talked about two really good ways to have a good, tight, effective, tight, loose leadership. Listen to the teachers, have highly collaborative teams. What's a third thing that principals can do to have that good, tight, loose leadership?
I think it has to be feedback. We've tried to provide, I have not done as good a job with it last year than I did in the previous years, but we have an assessment that we use on the performance of our teams. And I try to give feedback to our teams on how they're spending their time together, how they're going through conflict, how they are, working through the CFA process, the data team process, the innovation process, and just providing the feedback. And, I think I don't want us to come across the wrong way, but, it's important to be in classrooms. It's important to give individual teachers feedback. We've got a pretty extensive teacher observation cycle that we go through over the course of the year. But we also need to give feedback to the teams and how the teams are performing together. And some would say, and I agree, I think it's more vital it's a better way to spend time giving feedback to teams sometimes than just individual teachers. And I don't want that to be misunderstood or to come across the wrong way, but it goes to the power of PLCs, and that is the quality and the level that your collaborative teams are performing together.
Yeah. And, that's really important to not forget. But when you give that feedback to teachers, it's one thing. But when you can direct a whole team and then they can talk about how to implement that feedback, that's really powerful. One of the leaders that I had on the summit also is Justin Bader, and he talks about how to give effective feedback and how to not get stuck in that compliment sandwich and make truly impactful feedback for your teachers. So if you haven't checked that out, make sure you do, because that is really good advice. And if you do the all access pass, you can be able to go listen to that right now. And that would be a good way to kind of sandwich these two topics together, because it is so vital to have that effective feedback. When you're dealing with situations with those groups of teachers and you know that there's a person who's not really pulling their weight, how much does that impact what you're talking about with the rest of the teachers?
Oh boy, that's a really, really good question. I mean, if I would, probably talk with that teacher about how they're meeting their expectations amongst the team, but I would not do that in front of the rest of the team. It would be, through that, beginning off through their assessment cycle or their observation cycle. I would make it a point for a part of that to be, how does your performance look with the team, and how do you feel compared to what you think others feel? It's conversations that need to happen. I typically try to allow teams, kind of with that autonomy and with the interdependence of teams, you try to allow them the opportunity to take on some of those things as well. We've been very lucky, over the past several years to have very high functioning teams, especially these last 4 or 5 years. But that doesn't mean there's not conflict and there's not problems and there's not people who feel they're, pulling everyone's weight. Try to let the teams kind of hash it out first, and then if needed, go in after that and try to help with the situation. I think also it's just conflict is not a normal feeling, and most teachers don't like conflict. So oftentimes just the pure essence of conflict really makes people anxious and nervous. But I guess in my mind, it's always good to have, friction, creates diamonds type of thing. So it's not always a bad thing.
Yeah. It's also powerful that you let the teachers work it out themselves first, and giving them that autonomy again that you talked about earlier makes it so that they feel like they can actually deal with that problem. What advice do you have for a principal to help his teams be more effective and to allow them to work through those things themselves?
Well, I think the being focused, and I know as a principal we do it too. We give our teachers more and more and more stuff to do all the time, and I think you just have to build in your leaders the understanding of how they need to stay focused. Part of what I try to do as a leader is to develop more leaders. I don't want to add more followers. I want to develop more leaders, and that's kind of the topic that I've written on. I'm doing a solution tree blog that hopefully will come out here in the next month or two. But on that topic, I've learned a lot of that from John Maxwell and his thing, what he calls leaders math, which is develop more leaders, don't just add more followers. Followers will do what you ask them to do, but they're not going to really go on and expand the capacity of leadership in your school. So I try to develop those skills in teachers to be able to do that and to, lead their teams and to stay focused and try to keep giving them feedback on what the big things are, what the big rocks are for our school, and continue to stay focused with those things. But you have to have great leaders in your teams. You have to lead your leaders well. And I think the best advice I could give is to teach what you expect, but also to give out that leadership. Because I think a lot of times, we talk about giving out leadership in PLCs, but at the end of the day, the principals are still deciding so many things. And And until you really kind of jump off that cliff and allow that trust and allow your teachers to be leaders and even allow them to make mistakes and allow them to kind of learn from their mistakes, hopefully, I think is to teach what you expect from others and to develop more leaders, don't add more followers.
Yeah, that's a really great quote, and John Maxwell certainly knows what he's talking about there. I appreciate our time, your conversation. As we close up here, what's one thing that a principal should do today to start showing his teachers that he trusts them? Who should he go talk to, or who should she go talk to, and start that conversation going on what action step can they take to make that trust there?
I think you have to stay out of the politics of things and go to your best teachers. Go to the ones who are your influencers. Go to your ones who are rock stars. Go to your ones where, I kind of live by the rule of 80% of what we do is kind of led by 20% of our staff. And the 20% is that's the top notch, stellar, way above, talent, passion, lead others. They're not into it for the politics or to grind an axe, with somebody or whatever it may be. So you kind of have to start there and kind of build your capacity out from there. I don't think people ask enough questions. I think, you can do a survey. I think the best way to see how things are going or what others need or what the next steps are is to go ask. And it doesn't have to be at a formal leadership meeting or a staff meeting or a collaborative team meeting. Drop in someone's room, ask them what they think. What are they, how are they feeling about this? How are they feeling about that? And sometimes that may be somebody who's not in a leadership team, maybe, another person. But the best way to know how things are is to go ask and to get feedback. And sometimes it's not always the best feedback, but it's questions that you need to ask. And I think people feel more empowered by that. And I think it's just, the last thing I would say is it's just in your actions. It's, actions talk louder than words. You can talk all these things, but until you act with trust and you act by staying out of people's business, when you act by not micromanaging, over time, people get it. I mean, they really do. You may not be able to do it in a week or a day or maybe even your first year, but over time, that repetitive pattern will show itself to others. Like, he kind of allows us to do what we need to do, but he's going to hold us to, to this standard, for the whatever it may be.
Yeah, really great information there, Kyle. Thank you so much. And actions do speak louder than words. If you haven't listened to the interview on the summit with Amy Fast, who talks about going and getting feedback from your stakeholders and how to actually do that so they do answer the questions, that would be a great one to do as well. People can connect with you on Twitter, Kyle, and I know you're active on there. And then down below the video here are all the links to how to learn more from Kyle.
Sure.
And thank you, Kyle, so much for being a part of the Transformative Leadership Summit. And I know I learned a lot, and I know those who are watching did too. So
Absolutely. Thank you very much, Jethro.